Job, chapter 1. There's a man in the land of Uz. There's a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who reverentially feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters, who possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God arrived to present themselves before Adonai, and Satan also arrived among them. Adonai, Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, said to Satan, "From where have you arrived?" Satan answered Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who reverentially fears God, and turns away from evil?" Then Satan answered Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, and said, "Does Job reverentially fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. And stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he curses you to your face." And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of Yahweh the Lord Yahweh. Now there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there arrived a messenger to Job, and said, "The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabines fell upon them, and took them, and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there arrived another, and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven, and burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there arrived another, and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 groups, and made a raid on the camels, and took them, and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there arrived another, and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind arrived across the wilderness, and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose, and tore his robe, and shaved his head, and fell on the ground, and worshipped. And he said, "Naked I arrived from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return." Yahweh the Lord Yahweh gave, and Yahweh the Lord Yahweh has taken away. Blessed be the name of Yahweh the Lord Yahweh. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Again, there was a day when the sons of God arrived to present themselves before Yahweh the Lord Yahweh. And Satan also arrived among them to present himself before Yahweh the Lord Yahweh. And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, said to Satan, "From where have you arrived?" Satan answered Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who reverentially fears God and turns away from evil? He still holds fast his integrity, although you incite me against him to destroy him without reason." Then Satan answered Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, and said, "Skin for skin, all that a man has he gives for his life. And stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he curses you to your face." And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, said to Satan, Behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, and struck Job with loathsome sores, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a piece of broken pottery, with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. Then his wife said to him, Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die. And he said to her, You speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Do we receive good from God, and do we not receive evil? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that had arrived upon him, they arrived each from his own place, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to arrive and show him sympathy and comfort him. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. And they raised their voices and wept, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads toward heaven. And they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth, and said, Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, A man is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let clouds dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. That night let thick darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not arrive into the number of the months. Behold, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry enter it. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are ready to rouse up Leviathan. Let the stars of its dawn be dark. Let it hope for light and have none, nor see the eyelids of the morning, because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not die at birth, arrive out from the womb, and expire? Why did the knees receive me, or why the breast that I should nurse? For then I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept, then I would have been at rest, with kings and counselors of the earth, who rebuilt ruins for themselves, or with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or why was one not as a hidden stillborn child, as infants who never see the light? There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary are at rest. There the prisoners are at ease together. They hear not the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the slave is free from his master. Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter in soul, who long for death, and it arrives not, and dig for it more than for hidden treasures? Who rejoice exceedingly, and are glad when they find the grave? Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? For my sighing arrives instead of my bread, and my groanings are poured out like water. For the thing that one fears arrives upon me, or upon one's being, and what dread befalls one's being. One is not at ease, nor is one quiet. One has no rest, and trouble arrives. If one ventures a word with you, are you impatient? Yet who can keep from speaking? Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, If one ventures a word with you, are you patient? Yet who can keep from speaking? Behold, you have instructed many, and you have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have upheld him who was stumbling, and you have made firm the feeble knees. And now it has arrived to you, and you are impatient. It touches you, and you are dismayed. Is not your reverential fear of God, your confidence in the integrity of your ways, your hope? Remember, who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? As one has seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. The roar of the lion, the voice of the fierce lion, The teeth of the young lions are broken. The strong lion perishes for lack of prey, and the cubs of the lionesses are scattered. Now a word was brought to one's being, stealthily, one's ear received the whisper of it. Amid thoughts from visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, dread arrived upon one's being, and trembling, which made all one's bones shake. A spirit glided past one's face, the hair of one's flesh stood up. It stood still, and one could not discern its appearance. A form was before one's eyes, there was silence. Then one heard a voice. Can mortal man be in the right before God? Can a man be pure before his Maker? Even in his servants he puts no trust, and his angels he charges with error. How much more those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed like the moth. Between morning and evening they are beaten to pieces, they perish forever, without anyone regarding it. Is not their tent cord plucked up within them? Do they not die, and that without wisdom? Call now. Is there anyone who answers you? To which of the holy ones do you turn? Surely vexation kills the fool, and jealousy slays the simple. One has seen the fool taking root, and suddenly one cursed his dwelling. His children are far from safety, they are crushed in the gate, and there is no one to deliver them. The hungry eat his harvest, and he takes it even out of thorns. And the thirsty pant after his wealth. For affliction does not arrive from the dust, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. And man is born to trouble, as the sparks fly upward. As for one's being, one would seek God, and to God would one commit one's cause. Who does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number? He gives rain on the earth and sends waters on the fields. He sets on high those who are lowly, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. He frustrates the devices of the crafty, so that their hands achieve no success. He catches the wise in their own craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are brought to a quick end. They meet with darkness in the daytime, and grope at noonday as in night. And he saves the needy from the sword of their mouth, and from the hand of the mighty. So the poor have hope, and injustice shuts her mouth. Behold, blessed is the one who God reproves. Therefore despise not the discipline of the Almighty, for he wounds and he binds up, he shatters and his hands heal. He delivers you from 6 troubles, in 7 no evil touch you. In famine he redeems you from death, and in war from the power of the sword. You are hidden from the lash of the tongue, and do not fear destruction when it arrives. At destruction and famine you laugh, and do not fear the beasts of the earth. For you are in league with the stones of the field, and the beasts of the field are at peace with you. You know that your tent is at peace, and you inspect your fold and miss nothing. You know also that your offspring are many, and your descendants as the grass of the earth. You arrive to your grave in ripe old age, like a sheaf gathered up in its season. Behold, this one is searched out, it is true. Hear and know it for your good. Then Job answered and said, Oh, that one's vexation were weighed, and all one's calamity laid in the balances. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore one's words have been rash. For the arrows of the Almighty are in one's being. One's spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against one's being. Does a wild donkey bray when he has grass, or the ox low over his over his fodder? Can that which is tasteless be eaten without salt, or is there any taste in the juice of the mallow? One's appetite refuses to touch them. They are as food that is loathsome to one's being. Oh, that one might have one's requests, and that God would fulfill one's hope. That it would please God to crush one's being, that he would let loose his hand and cut one's being off. This would be one's comfort. One would even exult in pain unsparing. For one has not denied the words of Holy One. What is one's strength that one should wait? And what is one's end that one should be patient? Is one's strength the strength of stones, or is one's flesh bronze? Has one any help in one's being when resource is driven from one's being? He who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the reverential fear of the Almighty. One's brothers are treacherous as a torrent bed, as torrential streams that pass away, which are dark with ice, and where the snow hides itself. When they melt, they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. The caravans turn aside from their course. They go up into the waste and perish. The caravans of Tema look. The travelers of Sheba hope. They are ashamed because they were confident. They arrive there and are disappointed. For you are now nothing. You see one's calamity and are afraid. As one said, make one's being a gift. Or, from your wealth, offer a bribe for one's being. Or, deliver one's being from the adversary's hand. Or, redeem one's being from the hand of the ruthless. Teach one's being and one is silent. Make one understand how one has gone astray. How forceful are upright words. And what does reproof from you reprove? Do you think that you can reprove words when the speech of a despairing man is wind? You would even cast lots over the fatherless and bargain over your friend. And now be pleased to look at one's being, for one does not lie to your face. Please turn, let no injustice be done. Turn now, one's vindication is at stake. Is there any injustice on one's tongue? Cannot one's palate discern the cause of calamity? Has not man a hard service on earth? And are not his days like the days of a hired hand? Like a slave who longs for the shadow, and like a hired hand who looks for his wages. So one's allotted months of emptiness and nights of misery are apportioned to one's being. When one lies down, one says, when does one arise? And the night is long, and one is full of tossing till the dawn. One's flesh is clothed with worms and dirt, one's skin hardens, then breaks out afresh. One's days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and arrive to their end without hope. Remember that one's life is a breath. One's eye never again sees good. The eye of him who sees one's being beholds one's being no more. While your eyes are on one's being, one is gone. As the cloud fades and vanishes, so he who goes down to Sheol does not arrive up. He returns no more to his house, nor does his place know him any more. Therefore, one does not restrain one's mouth. One speaks in the anguish of one's spirit. One complains in the bitterness of one's soul. Is one the sea or a sea monster, that you set a guard over one's being? When one says, one's bed comforts one's being, one's couch eases one's complaint, then you scare one's being with dreams, and terrify one's being with visions, so that one would choose strangling and death rather than one's bones. One loathes one's life, one would not live forever. Leave one alone, for one's days are a breath. What is a man that you make so much of him, and that you set your heart on him? Visit him every morning, and test him every moment. How long do you not look away from one's being, nor leave one's being alone, till one swallows one's spit? If one sins, what does one do to you, you watcher of mankind? Why have you made one's being your mark? Why is one a burden to you? Why do you not pardon one's transgression and take away one's iniquity? For now one lies in the earth, you seek one's being, and one is not. How long do you say these things? Well, then Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, how long do you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. If you seek God and plead with the Almighty for mercy, if you are pure and upright, surely then he rouses himself for you and restores your rightful habitation. And though your beginning was small, your latter days are very great. For inquire, please, of bygone ages, and consider what the fathers have searched out. For for one's being is of yesterday, and know nothing. For one's days on earth are a shadow. Do they not teach you and tell you and utter words out of their understanding? Can papyrus grow where there is no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there is no water? While yet in flower and not cut down, they wither before any other plant. Such are the paths of all who forget God. The hope of the godless perish, his confidence is severed, and his trust is a spider's web. He leans against his house, and it does not stand. He lays hold of it, and it does not endure. He is a lush plant before the sun, and his shoots spread over his garden. His roots entwine the stone heap. He looks upon a house of stones. If he is destroyed from his place, then it denies him, saying, one has never seen you. Behold, this is the joy of his way, and out of the soil others spring. Behold, God does not reject a blameless man, nor take the hand of evildoers. He does not yet fill your mouth with laughter, and your lips are shouting, and your lips with shouting. Those who hate you are clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked is no more. Then Job answered and said, truly one knows that that is so. And how can a man be in the right before God? If one wished to contend with him, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength, who has hardened himself against him and succeeded. He who removes mountains, and they know it not, when he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble, who commands the sun, and it does not rise, who seals up the stars, who alone stretched out the heavens, and trampled the waves of the sea, who made the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades and the chambers of the south, who does great things beyond searching out, and marvelous things beyond number. Behold, he passes by one's being, and one sees him not. He moves on and does not perceive him. He moves on and one does not perceive him. Behold, he snatches away. Who can turn him back? Who says to him, what are you doing? God does not turn back his anger. Beneath him bowed the helpers of Rahab. How then can one answer him, choosing one's words with him? Though one is in the right, one cannot answer him. One must appeal for mercy to one's accuser. If one summoned him and he answered one's being, one would not believe that he was listening to one's voice. For he crushes one's being with a tempest and multiplies one's wounds without cause. He does not let one's being get one's breath and fills one's being with bitterness. If it is a contest of strength, behold, he is mighty. If it is a matter of justice, who can summon him? Though one is in the right, one's own mouth would condemn one's being. Though one is blameless, he would prove one's being perverse. One is blameless, one regards not oneself, one loathes one's life. It is all one, therefore one says, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When disaster brings sudden death, he mocks at the calamity of the innocent. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If it is not he, who then is it? One's days are swifter than a runner. They flee away. They see no good. They go by like skiffs of reed, like an eagle swooping on the prey. If one says, one does not forget one's complaint. One puts off one's sad face and be of good cheer. One is afraid of all one's suffering, for one knows one is not held innocent. One is condemned. Why then does one labor in vain? one washes oneself with snow and cleanses one's hands with lye, yet you plunge one's being into a pit, and one's clothes abhor one's being. For he is not a man as one is, that one might answer him, that one should arrive to trial together. There is no arbiter between one's beings. Who might lay his hands on one's being both? Let him take his rod away from one's being, and let not dread of him terrify one's being. Then one would speak without fear of him, for one is not so in oneself. One loathes one's life. One gives free utterance to one's complaint. One speaks in the bitterness of one's soul. One says to God, do not condemn one's being. Let one know why you contend against one's being. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands, and favor the designs of the wicked? Have you eyes of flesh? Do you see as man sees? Are your days as the days of man, or your years as a man's years? That you seek out one's iniquity and search for one's sin? Although you know that one is not guilty, and there is none to deliver out of your hand, your hands fashioned one's being and made one's being, and now you have destroyed one's being altogether. Remember that you have made one's being like clay, and do you return one's being to the dust? Did you not pour one's being out like milk, and curdle one's being like cheese? You clothed one's being with skin and flesh, and knit one's being together with bones and sinews. You have granted one's being life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved one's spirit. Yet these things you hid in your heart. One knows that this was your purpose. If one sins, you watch one's being, and do not acquit one's being of one's iniquity. If one is guilty, woe to one's being. If one is in the right, one cannot lift up one's head, for one is filled with disgrace. And look on one's affliction, and were one's head lifted up, you would hunt one's being like a lion, and again work wonders against one's being. You renew your witnesses against one's being, and increase your vexation toward one's being. You bring fresh troops against one's being. Why did you bring one's being out from the womb? Would that one had died before any eye had seen one's being, and were as though one had not been, carried from the womb to the grave. Are not one's days few? Then cease and leave one's being alone, that one may find a little cheer before one goes, and does not return, to the land of darkness and deep shadow, the land of gloom, like thick darkness, like deep shadow, without any order, where light is as thick darkness. Then Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, should a multitude of words go unanswered, and a man full of talk be judged right? Should your babble silence men, and when you mock, shall no one shame you? For you say, one's doctrine is pure, and one is clean in God's eyes, and oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom, for he is manifold in understanding. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It is higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. If he passes through and imprisons and summons the court, who can turn him back? For he knows worthless men. When he sees iniquity, does he not consider it? And a stupid man gets understanding. When a wild donkey's colt has borne a man, you prepare your heart, you stretch out your hands toward him. If iniquity is in your hand, put it far away, and let not injustice dwell in your tents. Surely then you lift up your face without blemish. You are secure, and you do not fear. You forget your misery. You remember it as waters that have passed away, and your life is brighter than the noonday. Its darkness is like the morning, and you are secure. You feel secure because there is hope. You look around and take your rest in security. You lie down, and none make you afraid. Many court your favor, and the eyes of the wicked fail. All way of escape is lost to them, and their hope is to breathe their last. Then Job answered and said, no doubt you are the people, and wisdom dies with you. And one has understanding as well as you. One is not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? One is a laughingstock to one's friends. One who called to God, and he answered one's being. A just and blameless man is a laughingstock. In the thought of one who is at ease, there is contempt for misfortune. It is ready for those whose feet slip. The tents of robbers are at peace, and those who provoke God are secure. Who bring their God in their hand, and ask the ask the beasts, and they teach you, the birds of the heavens, and they tell you, or the bushes of the earth, and they teach you, and the fish of the sea declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, has done this? In his hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind. Does not the ear test words as the palate tests food? Taste food. Wisdom is with the aged, and understanding in length of days. With God are wisdom and might. He is counsel and understanding. If he tears down, none can rebuild. If he shuts a man in, none can open. If he withholds the waters, they dry up. If he sends them out, they overwhelm the land. With him are strength and sound wisdom. The deceived and the deceiver are his. He leads counselors away stripped, and judges he makes fools. He looses the bonds of kings and binds a waistcloth on their hips. He leads priests away stripped and overthrows the mighty. He deprives of speech those who are trusted and takes away the discernment of the elders. He pours contempt on princes and loosens the belts of the strong. He uncovers the deeps out of darkness and brings deep darkness to light. He makes nations great, and he destroys them. He enlarges nations and leads them away. He takes away understanding from the chiefs of the people of the earth and makes them wander in a trackless waste. They grope in the dark without light, and he makes them stagger like a drunken man. Behold, one's eye has seen all this, one's ear has heard and understood it. What you know, one also knows. One is not inferior to you. One would speak to the Almighty and desire to argue one's case with God. As for you, you whitewash with lies. Worthless physicians are you all. Oh, that you would keep silent, and it would be your wisdom. Hear now one's argument, and listen to the pleadings of one's lips. Do you speak falsely for God, and speak deceitfully for him? Do you show partiality toward him? Do you plead the case for God? Is it well with you when he searches you out? Or can you deceive him, as one deceives a man? He surely rebukes you. If in secret you show partiality, does not his majesty terrify you, and the dread of him fall upon you? Your maxims are proverbs of ashes. Your defenses are defenses of clay. Let one have silence, and one speaks, and let arrive on one's being what may. Why should one take one's flesh in one's teeth, and put one's life in one's hand? Though he slays one's being, one's hope is in him. Yet one argues one's ways to his face. This is one's salvation, that the godless do not arrive before him. Keep listening to one's words, and let one's declaration be in your ears. Behold, that one has prepared one's case. One knows that one is in the right. Who is there who contends with one's being? For then one would be silent and die. Only grant one's being two things. Then one does not hide oneself from your face. Withdraw your hand far from one's being, and let not dread of you terrify one's being. Then call and one answers, or let one speak and you reply to one's being. How many are one's iniquities and one's sins? Make one know one's transgressions and one's sins. Why do you hide your face and count one's being as your enemy? Do you frighten a driven leaf and pursue dry chaff? For you write bitter things against one's being, and make one's being inherit the iniquities of one's youth. You put one's feet in the stocks, and watch all one's paths. You set a limit for the soles of one's feet. Man wastes away like a rotten thing, like a garment that is moth-eaten. Man who is born of a woman is few of days and full of trouble. He arrives like a flower and withers. He flees like a shadow and continues not. And do you open your eyes on such a one and bring one's judgment with you? Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? There is not one. Since its days are determined, the number of his months is with you, and you have appointed his limits that he cannot pass. Look away from him and leave him alone, that he may enjoy like a hired hand his day. He wanders abroad for bread, saying, where is it? He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Distress and anguish terrify him. They prevail against him like a king ready for battle, because he has stretched out his hand against God and defies the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with a thickly bossed shield, because he has covered his face with his fat and gathered fat upon his waist, and has lived in desolate cities and houses that none should inhabit, which were ready to be heaps of ruins. He is not rich, and his wealth does not endure, nor do his possessions spread over the earth. He does not depart from darkness, the flame dries up his shoots, and by the breath of his mouth he departs. Let him not trust in emptiness, deceiving himself, for emptiness is his payment. It is not paid in full before his time, and his branch is not green. He shakes off his unripe grape like the vine, and casts off his blossom like the olive tree. For the company of the godless is barren, and fire consumes the tents of bribery. They conceive trouble and give birth to evil, and their womb prepares deceit. Then Job answered and said, one has heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Do windy words have an end? Or what provokes you to that answer? Or what provokes you that you answer? One also could speak as you do, if you were in one's place. One could join words together against you and shake one's head at you. One could strengthen you with one's mouth, and the solace of one's lips would assuage your pain. If one speaks, one's pain is not assuaged. If one forbears, how much of it leaves one's being? Surely now God has worn one's being out. He has made desolate all one's company, and has shriveled one's being up, which is a witness against one's being. And one's leanness has risen up against one's being. It testifies to one's face. He has torn one's being in his wrath and hated one's being. He has gnashed his teeth at one's being. One's adversary sharpens his eyes against one's being. Men have gaped at one's being with their mouth. They have struck one's being insolently on the cheek. They mass themselves together against one's being. God gives one's being up to the godly, and casts one's being into the hands of the wicked. One was at ease, and he broke one's being apart. He seized one's being by the neck, and dashed one's being to pieces. He set one's being up as his target. His archers surround one's being. He slashes open one's kidneys and does not spare. He pours out one's gall on the ground. He breaks one's being with breach upon breach. He runs upon one's being like a warrior. One has sewed sackcloth upon one's skin, and has laid one's strength in the dust. One's face is red with weeping, and on one's eyelids is deep darkness. Although there is no violence in one's hands, and one's prayer is pure. O earth, cover not one's blood, and let one's being cry find no resting place. Even now, behold, one's witness is in heaven, and he who testifies for one's being is on high. One's friends scorn one's being, one's eye pours out tears to God, that he would argue the case of a man with God, as a son of man does this with his neighbor. For when a few years have arrived, one goes the way from which one does not return. One's spirit is broken, one's days are extinct, the graveyard is ready for one's being. Surely there are mockers about one's being, and one's eyes dwells on their provocation. Lay down a pledge for one's being with you. Who is there who puts up security for one's being? Since you have closed their hearts to understanding, therefore you do not know, or you do not let them triumph. He who informs against his friends to get a share of their property, the eyes of his children fail. He has made one's being a byword of the peoples, and one is one before whom men spit. One's eyes have grown dim from vexation, and all one's members are like a shadow. The upright are appalled at this, and the innocent stirs himself up against the godless. Yet the righteous holds to his way, and he who has clean hands grows stronger and stronger. And you arrive on again, all of you, and one does not find a wise man among you. One's days are past, one's plans are broken off, the desires of one's heart, they make night into day. The light, they say, is near to the darkness. If one hopes for Sheol as one's house, if one's bed is made in darkness, one says to the pit, if one makes one's bed in darkness, if one says to the pit, you are one's father, and to the worm, one's mother, or one's sister, where then is one's hope? Who sees one's hope? Does it go down to the bars of Sheol? Does one descend together into the dust? Then Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, how long do you hunt for words? Consider, and then we speak. Why are we counted? And then one speaks. Why is one counted as cattle? Why is one stupid in your sight? You who tear yourself in your anger, does the earth is forsaken for you, or the rock is removed out of its place? Oh, is the earth forsaken for you, or the rock removed out of its place? Indeed, the light of the wicked is put out, and the flame does not shine. The light is dark in his tent, and his lamp above him is put out. His strong steps are shortened, and his own schemes throw him down. For he is cast into a net by his own feet, and he walks on its mesh. A trap seizes him by the heel, a snare lays hold of him, a rope is hidden for him in the ground, a trap for him in the path. Terrors frighten him on every side, and chase him at his heels. His strength is famished, and calamity is ready for his stumbling. It consumes a part of his skin. The firstborn of death consumes his limbs. He is torn from the tent in which he trusted, and is brought to the king of terrors. In his tent dwells that which is none of his. Sulfur is scattered over his habitation. His roots dry up beneath, and his branches wither above. His memory perishes from the earth, and he has no name in the street. He is thrust from light into darkness, and driven out of the world. He has no posterity or progeny among his people, and no survivor where he used to live. They of the west are appalled at his day, and horror seizes them of the east. Surely such are the dwellings of the unrighteous. Such is the place of him who knows not God. Then Job answered and said, how long do you torment one's being, and break one's being in pieces with words? These 10 times you have cast reproach upon one's being. Are you not ashamed to wrong one's being? And even if it be true that one has erred, one's error remains with one's being. If indeed you magnify yourselves against one's being, and make one's disgrace an argument against one's being, know then that God has put one's being in the wrong, and closed his net about one's being. Behold, one cries out violence, and one is not answered. One calls for help, and there is no justice. He has walled up one's way, so that one cannot pass, and he has set darkness upon one's paths. He has stripped one's being from one's glory. He stripped from one's being one's glory, and taken the crown from one's head. He breaks one's being down on every side, and one is gone. And one's hope has he pulled up like tree. He has kindled his wrath against one's being, and counts one's being as his adversary. His troops arrive together. They have cast up their siege ramp against one's being, and encamp around one's tent. He has put one's brothers far from one's being, and those who knew one's being are wholly estranged from one's being. One's relatives have failed one's being, one's close friends have forgotten one's being. The guests at one's house and one's maidservants count one's being as a stranger. One is a foreigner in their eyes. One calls to one's servant, and he gives one's being no answer. One pleads with him with one's mouth for mercy. One's breath is strange to one's wife, and one is a stench to the children of one's own mother. Even young children despise one's being. When one rises, they talk against one's being. All one's intimate friends abhor one's being, and those whom one loved have turned against one's being. One's bones stick to one's skin and to one's flesh, and one has escaped by the skin of one's teeth. Have mercy on one's being, have mercy on one's being, O you, one's friends, for the hand of God has touched one's being. Why do you, like God, pursue one's being? Why are you not satisfied with one's flesh? Oh, that one's words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved in the rock forever. For one knows that one's Redeemer lives, and at the last he stands upon the earth. And after one's skin has been thus destroyed, yet in one's flesh one sees God, whom one sees for oneself, and one's eyes behold, and not another. One's heart faints within one's being. If you say, how do we pursue him? And the root of the matter is found in him. Be afraid of the sword, for wrath brings the punishment of the sword, that you may know that there is judgment. Then Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, therefore one's thoughts answer one's being, because of one's haste within one's being. One hears censure that insults one's being, and out of one's understanding a spirit answers one's being. Do you not know this from of old, since man was placed on earth, that the exulting of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless is for a moment? Though his height mount up to the heavens, and his head reach to the clouds, he perishes forever like his own dung. Those who have seen him say, where is he? He flies away like a dream and is not found. He is chased away like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him sees him no more, nor is his place any more, nor does his place any more behold him. His children seek the favor of the poor, and his hands give back his wealth. His bones are full of his youthful vigor, and it lies down with him in the dust. Though evil is sweet in his mouth, though he hides it under his tongue, though he is loath to let it go, and holds it in his mouth, yet his food is turned in his stomach, is the venom of cobras within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. God casts them out of his belly. He sucks the poison out of cobras. The tongue of a viper kills him. He does not look upon the rivers, the streams flowing with honey and curds. He gives back the fruit of his toil and does not swallow it down. From the profit of his trading, he gets no enjoyment. For he has crushed and abandoned the poor. He seized a house that he did not build, because he knew no contentment in his belly. He does not let anything in which he delights escape him. There is nothing left after he had eaten. Therefore his prosperity does not endure. In the fullness of his sufficiency, he is not in distress. The hand of everyone in misery arrives against him. To fill his belly to the full, God sends his burning anger against him, and rain it upon him into his body. He flees from an iron weapon, a bronze arrow strikes him through, is drawn forth and arrives out of his body. The glittering point arrives out of his gallbladder. Terrors arrive upon him. Utter darkness is laid up for his treasures. A fire not fanned devours him. What is left in his tent is consumed. The heavens reveals his iniquity, and the earth rises up against him. The possessions of his house are carried away, dragged off in the day of God's wrath. This is the wicked man's portion from God, the heritage decreed for him by God. Then Job answered and said, Keep listening to one's words, and let this be your comfort. Bear with one's being, and one speaks. And after one has spoken, mock on. As for one's being, is one's complaint against man? Why should one not be impatient? Look at one's being and be appalled, and lay your hand over your mouth. When one remembers, one is dismayed, and shuddering seizes one's flesh. Why do the wicked live, reach old age, and grow mighty in power? Their offspring are established in their presence, and their descendants before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, and no rod of God is upon them. Their bull breathes without fail, their cow calves, and does not miscarry. They send out their little boys like a flock, and their children dance. They sing to the tambourine and the lyre, and rejoice to the sound of the pipe. They spend their days in prosperity, and in peace they go down to Sheol. They say to God, Depart from one's being. We do not desire the knowledge of your ways. What is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we get if we pray to him? What profit does one get when one prays to him? Yeah. What is the Almighty that one should serve him? And what profit does one get if one prays to him? Behold, is not their prosperity in their hand? The counsel of the wicked is far from one's being. How often is that the lamp of the wicked is put out, that their calamity arrives upon them, that God distributes pain in his anger. That they are like straw before the wind, and like chaff that the storm carries away. You say, God stores up their iniquity for their children. Let him pay it out to them, that they may know it, that their own eyes see their destruction, and let them drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what do they care for their houses after them, when the number of their months is cut off? Do any teach God knowledge, seeing that he judges those who are on high? One who dies in his full vigor, being wholly at ease and secure, his pails full of milk, and the marrow of his bones moist. Another dies in bitterness of soul, never having tasted of prosperity. They lie down alike in the dust, and the worms cover him. Behold, one knows your thoughts and your schemes to wrong one's being. For you say, Where is the house of the prince? Where is the tent in which the wicked lived? Have you not asked those who travel the roads, and do you not accept their testimony? That the evil man is spared in the day of calamity, that he is rescued in the day of wrath. Who declares his way to his face, and who repays him for what he has done? When he is carried to the grave, watch is kept over his tomb. The clods of the valley are sweet to him. All mankind follows after him, and those who go before him are innumerable. And then do you comfort one's being with empty nothings? There is nothing left of your answers except falsehood. Behold, they lie down in the dust, and the worms cover them. Behold, one knows your thoughts and your schemes to wrong one's being. For you say, Where is the house of the prince? Where is the tent in which the wicked live? Have you not asked those who travel the roads, and do you not accept their testimony, that the evil man is spared in the day of calamity, that he is rescued in the day of wrath. Who declares his way to his face, and who repays him for what he has done? When he is carried to the grave, watch is kept over his tomb. The clouds of the valley are sweet to him, all mankind follows after him, and those who go before him are innumerable. How then is one comforted with empty nothings by you? There is nothing left of your answers except falsehood. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, it's chapter 22, can a man be profitable to God? Surely he who is wise is profitable to himself. Is it any pleasure to the Almighty if you are in the right, or is it any gain to him if you make your ways blameless? Is it for your reverential fear of him that he reproves you and enters into judgment with you? Is not your evil abundant? There is no end to your iniquities, for you exacted pledges of your brothers for nothing, and stripped the naked of their clothing. You have given no water to the weary to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. The man with power possessed the land, and the favored man lived in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the arms of the fatherless were crushed. Therefore snares are all around you, and sudden terror overwhelms you. Or darkness so that you cannot see, and a flood of water covers you. Is not God high in the heavens? See the highest stars, how lofty they are. And you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the deep darkness? Thick clouds veil him so that he does not see, and he walks out on the vault of heaven. Thick clouds veil him so that he does not see, and he walks in the vault of heaven. Do you keep the old way that wicked men have trod? They are snatched away before their time. Their foundation was washed away. They said to God, depart from one's being, and what can the Almighty do to us? Do to one's being. Yet he filled their houses with good things, and the counsel of the wicked is far from one's being. The righteous see it and are glad. The innocent one mocks at them, saying, surely your adversaries are cut off, and what they left the fire has consumed. Surely one's adversaries are cut off, and what they left the fire has consumed. Agree with God and be at peace. Thereby good arrives to you. Receive instruction from his mouth, and lay up his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you are built up. If you remove injustice far from your tents, you lay gold in the dust, and gold of Ophir among the stones of the torrent bed. Then the Almighty are your gold, and your precious silver, for then you delight yourself in the Almighty, and lift up your face to God. You make your prayer to him, and he hears you, and you pay your vows. You decide on matter, and it is established for you, and light shines on your ways. For when they are humbled, you say, it is because of pride, and he saves the lowly. He delivers even the one who is not innocent, who is delivered through the cleanness of your hands. Then Job answered and said, chapter 23. Then Job answered and said, today also one's complaint is bitter, one's hand is heavy on account of one's groaning. Oh, that one knew where one might find him, that one might arrive even to his seat. One would lay one's case before him, and fill one's mouth with arguments. One would know what he would answer one's being, and understand what he would say to one's being. Would he contend with one's being in the greatness of his power? No, he would pay attention to one's being. There an upright man could argue with him, and one could be acquitted forever by one's judge. Behold, one goes forward, and he is not there, and backward, and one does not perceive him. On the left hand, when he is working, one does not behold him. He turns to the right hand, and one does not see him. And he knows the way that one takes. When he has tried one's being, one arrives out of gold. One's foot has held fast to his steps. One has kept his way and has not turned aside. One has not departed from the commandment of his lips. One has treasured the words of his mouth, much more than one's portion of food. And he is unchangeable, and who can turn him back? What he desires, what he does, for he completes what he appoints for one's being. And many such things are in his mind. Therefore, one is terrified at his presence. When one considered When one considers, one is in dread of him. God has made one's heart faint. The Almighty has terrified one's being. Yet one is not silenced because of the darkness, nor because thick darkness covers one's face. Why are not times of judgment kept by the Almighty, and why do those who know him never see his days? Some move landmarks, they seize flocks and pasture them. They drive away the donkey of the fatherless. They take the widow's ox for a pledge. They thrust the poor, chapter 24. They thrust the poor off the road. The poor of the earth all hide themselves. Behold, like wild donkeys in the desert, the poor go out to their toil, seeking game. The wasteland yields food for their children. They gather their fodder in the field, and they glean the vineyard of the wicked man. They lie all night naked, without clothing, and have no covering in the cold. They are wet with the rain of the mountains, and cling to the mountain for lack of shelter. There are also those who snatch the fatherless child from the breast, and they take a pledge against the poor. They go about naked, without clothing, hungry, they carry the sheaves. Among the olive rows of the wicked they make oil. They tread the winepresses, and suffer thirst. From out of the city the dying groan, and the soul of the wounded cries for help. Yet God charges no one with wrong. There are those who rebel against the light, who are not acquainted with its ways, and do not stay in its paths. The murderer rises before its light, that he kills the poor and needy, and in the night he is like a thief. The eye of the adulterer also waits for the twilight, saying, no eye sees one's being, and he veils his face. In the dark they dig through houses, by day they shut themselves up. They do not know the light, for deep darkness is morning to all of them, for they are friends with the terrors of deep darkness. You say, swift are they on the face of the waters. Their portion is cursed in the land. No treader turns toward their vineyards. Drought and heat snatch away the snow waters. So does Sheol those who have sinned. The womb forgets them. The worm finds them sweet. They are no longer remembered, so wickedness is broken like a tree. They wrong the barren, childless woman, and do no good to the widow. Yet God prolongs the life of the mighty, by his power. They rise up when they despair of life. He gives them security, and they are supported, and his eyes are upon their ways. They are exalted a little while, and then are gone. They are brought low and gathered up like all others. They are cut off like the heads of grain. If it is not so, who proves one's being a liar, and show that there is nothing in what one says? Chapter 25. Then Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, dominion and reverential fear are with God. He makes peace in his high heaven. Is there any number to his army? Upon whom does his light not arise? How then can man be in the right before God? How can he who is born of woman be pure? Behold, even the moon is not bright, and the stars are not pure in his eyes. How much less man who is a maggot, and the son of man who is a worm? Chapter 26. Then Job answered and said, how have you helped him who has no power? How you have saved the arm that has no strength? How you have counseled him who has no wisdom, and plentifully declared sound knowledge? With whose help have you uttered words, and whose breath has arrived out from you? The dead tremble under the waters and their inhabitants. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. He stretches out the north over the void, and hangs the earth on nothing. He binds up the waters in his thick clouds, and the cloud is not split open under them. He covers the face of the full moon, and spreads over it his cloud. He has inscribed a circle on the face of the waters, at the boundary between light and darkness. The pillars of heaven trembled, and are astounded at his rebuke. By his power he stilled the sea, by his understanding he shattered Rahab. By his wind the heavens were made fair. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. Behold, these are just the outskirts of his ways, and how small a whisper does one hear of him, and the thunder of his power who can understand? And Job again took up his discourse, chapter 27. Job again took up his discourse and said, As God lives, who has taken away one's right, and the Almighty, who has made one's soul bitter, as long as one's breath is in one's being, and the Spirit of God is in one's nostrils. One's lips does not speak falsehood, and one's tongue does not utter deceit. Far be it from one's being to say that you are right. Till one dies, one does not put away one's integrity from one's being. One holds fast one's righteousness and does not let go. One's heart does not reproach one's being for any of one's days. Let one's enemy be as the wicked, and let him who rises up against one's being be as the unrighteous. For what is the hope of the godless when God cuts him off, when God takes away his life? Does God hear his cry when distress arrives upon him? Does he take delight in the Almighty? Does he call upon God at all times? Does one teach you concerning the hand of God? What is with the Almighty that one does not conceal? One teaches you concerning the hand of God. What is with the Almighty one does not conceal. Behold, all of you have seen it yourselves. Why then have you decided altogether to be vain? This is a portion of a wicked man with God, and the heritage that oppressors receive from the Almighty. If his children are multiplied, it is for the sword, and his descendants have not enough bread. Those who survive him in the pestilence buries, and his widows do not weep. Though he heap up silver like dust, and pile up clothing like clay, he may pile it up, and the righteous wears it. And the innocent divide the silver. He builds his house like a mosque, like a booth that a watchman makes. He goes to bed rich, and does so no more. He opens his eyes, and his wealth is gone. Terrors overtake him like a flood in the night of a whirlwind, and then the night a whirlwind carries him off. The east wind lifts him up, and he is gone. It sweeps him out of his place. It hurls at him without pity. He flees from its power in headlong flight. It claps its hands at him and hisses at him from its place. Chapter 28. Surely there is a mine of silver and a place for gold that they refine. Iron is taken out of the earth, and copper is smelted from the ore. Man puts an end to darkness and searches out to the farthest limit the ore in gloom and deep darkness. He opens shafts in a valley away from where anyone lives. They are forgotten by travelers. They hang in the air far away from mankind. They swing to and fro. As for the earth, out of it arrives bread, and underneath it is turned up as by fire. Its stones are the place of sapphires, and it has dust of gold. That path no bird of prey knows, and the falcon's eye has not seen it. The proud beasts have not trodden it, the lion has not passed over it. Man puts his hand to the flinty rock and overturns mountains by the roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eye sees every precious thing. He dams out the streams so that they do not trickle, and the thing that is hidden he brings out to light. And where is wisdom found? And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its worth, and it is not found in the land of the living. The deep says, It is not in me, and the sea says, It is not with me. It cannot be bought for gold, and silver cannot be weighed as its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or sapphire. Gold and glass cannot equal it, nor can it be exchanged for jewels of fine gold. No mention is made of coral or of crystal. The price of wisdom is above pearls. The topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. From where then does wisdom arrive, and where is the place of understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all living, and concealed from the birds of the air. Abaddon and Death say, one has heard a rumor of it with one's ears. God understands the way to it, and he knows its place, for he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he gave to the wind its weight, and apportioned the waters by measure, when he made a decree for the rain, and a way for the lightning of the thunder, then he saw it and declared it, he established it and searched it out. And he said to man, behold, the reverential fear uh, of Adonai, of Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding. Chapter 29. And Job again took up his discourse and said, oh, that one were in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over one's being, when his lamp shone upon one's head, and by his light one walked through darkness, as one was in one's prime, when the friendship of God was upon one's tent, when the Almighty was yet with one's being, when one's children were all around one's being, when one's steps were washed with butter, and the rock poured out for one's being streams of oil, when one went out to the city, to the gate of the city, when one prepared one's seat in the square. The young men saw one's being and withdrew, and the aged rose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and laid their hand on their mouth. The voice of the nobles was hushed, and their tongue stuck to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard, it called one's being blessed. When the eye saw, it approved, because one delivered the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to help him. The blessing of him who was about to perish arrived upon one's being, and one caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. One put on righteousness, and it clothed one's being. One's justice was like a robe and a turban. Uh, One was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. One was a father to the needy, and one searched out the cause of him whom one did not know. One broke the fangs of the unrighteous and made him drop his prey from his teeth. Then one thought, one dies in one's nest, and one multiplies one's days as the sand. One's roots spread out to the waters, with the dew all night on one's branches. One's glory fresh with one's being, and one's bow ever new in one's hands. Men listened to one's being, and waited, and kept silence for one's counsel. After one spoke, they did not speak again, and one's word dropped upon them. They waited for one's being as for the rain, and they opened their mouths as for the spring rain. One smiled on them when they had no confidence. In the light of one's face, they did not cast down. One chose their way, and sat as chief, and lived like a king among his troops, like one who comforts mourners. And now chapter 30. And now they laugh at one's being, men who are younger than one's being, whose fathers one would have disdained, to set with the dogs of one's flock. What could one gain from the strength of their hands, men whose vigor is gone? Through want and hard hunger, they gnaw the dry ground by night in waste and desolation. They pick saltwort and the leaves of bushes and the roots of the broom tree for their flood. They are driven out from human company. They shout after them as after a thief. In the gullies of the torrents they must dwell, in holes of the earth and of the rocks. Among the bushes they bray. Under the nettles they huddle together. A senseless, a nameless brood, they have been whipped out of the land. And now one is their song. One is a byword to them. They abhor one's being. They keep aloof from one's being. They do not hesitate to spit at the sight of one's being, because God has loosed one's cord and humbled one's being. They have cast off his strength in one's presence. On one's right hand the rabble rise. They push away one's feet. They cast up against one's being their ways of destruction. They break up one's path. They promote one's calamity. They need no one to help them. As through a wide breach they arrive. Amid the crash they roll on. Terrors are turned upon one's being, one's honor is pursued as by the wind, and one's prosperity has passed away like a cloud. And now one's soul is poured out within one's being. Days of affliction have taken hold of one's being. The night racks one's bones, and the pain that gnaws one's being takes no rest. With great force one's garment is disfigured. It binds one's being about like the collar of one's tunic. God has cast one's being into the mire, and one is like dust and ashes. One cries to you for help, and you do not answer one's being. One stands, and you only look at one's being. You have turned cruel to one's being. With the might of your hand, you persecute one's being. You lift one up on the wind. You make one ride on it. You toss one's being about in the roar. You toss one's being about in the roar of the storm. For one knows that you bring one's being to death, into the house appointed for all living. Yet does not one in a heap of ruins stretch out his hand, and in his disaster cry for help. Did not one weep for him whose day was hard? Was not one's soul grieved for the needy? And when one hoped for good, evil arrived, and when one waited for light, darkness arrived. One's inward parts are in turmoil and never still. Days of affliction arrive to meet one's being. One goes about darkened and not by the sun. One stands up in the assembly and cries for help. One is a brother of jackals and a companion of ostriches. One's skin turns black and falls from one's being, and one's bones burn with heat. One's lyre is turned to mourning, and one's pipe to the voice of those who weep. Chapter 31. One has made a covenant with one's eyes. How then could one gaze at a virgin? What would be one's portion from God above, and one's heritage from the Almighty on high? Is not calamity for the unrighteous, and disaster for the workers of iniquity? Does not he see one's ways and number all one's steps? If one has walked with falsehood, and one's foot has hastened to deceit, let one be weighed in a just balance, and let God know one's integrity. If one's step has turned aside from the way, and one's heart has gone after one's eyes, and if any spot has stuck to one's hands, then let one sow, another eat. Then let what grows for one's being be rooted out. If one's heart has been enticed toward a woman, and one has lain in wait at one's neighbor's door, then let one's wife grind for another, and let others bow down on her. For that would be a heinous crime. That would be an iniquity to be punished by the judges, for that would be a fire that consumes as far as Abaddon, and it would burn to the root all one's increase. If one has rejected the cause of one's manservant or one's maidservant when they brought a complaint against one's being, what then does one do when God rises up? When he makes inquiry, what does one answer him? Did not he who made one's being in the womb make him? And did not one fashion one's being in the womb? If one has withheld anything that the poor desired, or has caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or has eaten one's morsel alone, and the fatherless has not eaten of it, for from one's youth the fatherless grew up with one's being as with a father, and from one's mother's womb one guided the widow. If one has seen anyone perish for lack of nothing, or the needy without covering, if his body has not blessed one's being, if he has not warmed with the fleece of one's sheep, not have warmed with the fleece of one's sheep, I also will answer, if one has raised one's hand against the fatherless because one saw one's help in the gate, then let one's shoulder blade fall from one's shoulder, and let one's arm be broken from its socket. For one was in terror of calamity from God, and one could not have faced his majesty. If one has made gold one's trust, or called fine gold one's confidence, if one has rejoiced because one's wealth was abundant, or because one's hand had found much, if one has looked at the sun when it shone, or the moon moving in splendor, and one's heart has been secretly enticed, and one's mouth has kissed one's hand, this also would be an iniquity to be punished by the judges, for one would have been false to God above. If one has rejoiced at the ruin of him who hated one's being, or exulted when evil overtook him, one has not let one's mouth sin by asking for his life with a curse. If the men of one's tent have not said, who is there that has not been filled with his meat? The sojourner has not lodged in the street. One has opened one's doors to the traveler. If one has concealed one's transgressions as others do, by hiding one's iniquity in one's heart, because one stood in great fear of the multitude, and the contempt of families terrified one's being, so that one kept silence and did not go outdoors. Oh, that one had one to hear one's being. Here is one's signature. Let the Almighty answer one's being. Oh, that one had the indictment written by one's adversary. Surely one would carry it on one's shoulder. One would bind it on one's being as a crown. One would give him an account of all one's steps. Like a prince, one would approach him. If one's land has cried out against one's being, and its furrows have wept together, if one has eaten its yield without payment and made its owners breathe their last, let thorns grow instead of wheat, and foul weeds instead of barley. The words of Job are ended. Chapter 32. So these three men ceased to answer Job, because he is righteous in his own eyes. Then Elihu, the son of Barashel, the Buzite, of the family of Ram, burned with anger. He burned with anger at Job, because he justified himself rather than God. He burned with anger also at Job's three friends, because they had found no answer, although they had declared Job to be in the wrong. Now Elihu had waited to speak to Job, because they are older than he. And when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, he burned with anger. And Elihu the son of Barashel the Buzite answered and said, one is young in years, and you are aged. Therefore one is timid and afraid, or one was timid and afraid, to declare one's opinion to you. One said, let days speak and many years teach wisdom, and it is the spirit in man, the breath of the Almighty, that makes him understand. It is not the old who are wise, nor the aged who understand what is right. Therefore, one says, listen to one's being, let one's being also declare one's opinion. Behold, one waited for your words, one listened for your wise sayings, while you searched out what to say. One gave you one's attention, and behold, there is none among you who refuted Job, or who answered his words. Beware lest you say, one has found wisdom, God may vanquish him, not a man. He has not directed his words against one's being, and one does not answer him with your speeches. They are dismayed, they answer no more. They have not a word to say. And one waits because they do not speak, because they stand there and answer no more. One also answers with one's share, one also declares one's opinion, for one is full of words. The spirit within one's being constrains one's being. Behold, one's belly is like wine that has no vent, like new wineskins ready to burst. One speaks that one may find relief. One opens one's lips and answers. One does not show partiality to any man, or use flattery toward any person, for one does not know how to flatter, else one's maker would soon take one's being away. And now, hear one's speech, O Job, and listen to all one's words. Behold, one opens, chapter 33. And now, hear one's speech, O Job, and listen to all one's words. Behold, one opens one's mouth, the tongue in one's mouth speaks. One's words declare the uprightness of one's heart, and what one's lips know they speak sincerely. The Spirit of God Spirit of God has made one's being, and the breath of the Almighty gives one's being life. Answer one's being if you can. Set your words in order before one's being. Take your stand. Behold, towards one is towards God as you are. One too was pinched off from a piece of clay. Behold, no fear of one's being need terrify you. One's pressure is not heavy upon you. Surely you have spoken in one's ears, and have heard the sound of your words. You say, one is pure, without transgression, one is clean, and there is no iniquity in one's being. Behold, he finds occasions against one's being. He counts one's being as his enemy. He puts one's feet in the stocks, and watches all one's paths. Behold, in this you are not right. One answers you, for God is greater than man. Why do you contend against him, saying, he answers none of man's words? For God speaks in one way, and in two, though man does not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men, while they slumber on their beds, then he opens the ears of men, and terrifies them with warnings, that he may turn man aside from his deed, and conceal pride from a man. He keeps back his soul from the pit, his life from perishing by the sword. Man is also rebuked with pain on his bed, and with continual strife in his bones, so that his life loathes the bread, and his appetite the choicest food. His flesh is so wasted away that it cannot be seen, and his bones, that were not seen, stick out. His soul draws near the pit, and his life to those who bring death. If there be for him an angel, a mediator, one of the 1,000, to declare to man what is right for him, and he is merciful to him, and says, deliver him from going down into the pit. One has found a ransom. Let his flesh be fresh with youth. Let him return to the days of his youthful vigor. Then man prays to God, and he accepts him. He sees his face with a shout of joy, and he restores to man his righteousness. He sings before men and says, One sinned and perverted what was right, and it was not repaid to one's being. He has redeemed one's soul from going down into the pit, and one's life looks upon the light. Behold, God does all these things, twice, 3 times, with a man, to bring back his soul from the pit, that he may be lighted with the, so he may be lighted, so that he is lighted with the light of life. Pay attention, O Job, listen to one's being, be silent, and one speaks. If you have any words, answer one's being, speak, for one desires to justify you. If not, listen to one's being, be silent, and one teaches you wisdom. Chapter 34. And Elihu answered and said, or Elihu, hear one's words, you wise men, and give ear to one's being, you who know. For the ear tests words, as the palate tastes food. Let one choose what is right. Let one know among oneself what is good. For Job has said, one is in the right, and God has taken away one's right. In spite of one's right, one is counted a liar. One's wound is incurable, though one is without transgression. When man is like Job, who drinks up scoffing like water, who travels in company with evildoers and walks with wicked men. For he has said, it profits a man nothing, that he should take delight in God. Therefore, hear one's being, ye men of understanding. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should do wrong. For according to the work of a man he repays him, and according to his ways he makes it befall him. Of a truth, God does not do wickedly, and the Almighty does not pervert justice. Who gave him charge over the earth, and who laid on him the whole world? If he should set his heart to it, and gather to himself his spirit and his breath, all flesh would perish together, and man would return to dust. If you have understanding, hear this. Listen to what one says. Does one who hates justice govern? Do you condemn him who is righteous and mighty? Who says to the king, worthless one, and to nobles, wicked man? Who shows no partiality to princes, nor regards the rich more than the poor? For they are all the work of his hands. In a moment they die. At midnight the people are shaken and pass away. and the mighty are taken away by no human hand. For his eyes are on the ways of a man, and he sees all his steps. There is no gloom or deep darkness where evildoers may hide themselves. For God has no need to consider a man further, that he should go before God in judgment. He showers the mighty without investigation and sets others in their place, thus knowing their works. He overturns them in the night, and they are crushed. He strikes them for their wickedness in a place for all to see. Because they turned aside from him, following him, and had no regard for any of his ways, so that they caused the cry of the poor to arrive to him, and he heard the cry of the afflicted. When he is quiet, who can condemn? When he hides his face, who can behold him? Whether it be a nation or a man, that a godless man should not reign, that he should not ensnare the people. For as anyone said to God, one is born punishment, one is not offended any more. Teach one's being what one does not see. If one does not have iniquity, does one do it no more? Will he then make repayment to suit you because you reject it? For you must choose, and not I. Therefore, declare what you know, for you must choose, and not one's being. Therefore, declare what you know. Men of understanding say to one's being, and the wise man who hears one's being says, Job speaks without knowledge, his words are without insight. Would that Job were tried to the end, because he answers like wicked men. For he adds rebellion to his sin, he claps his hands among one's being, and multiplies his words against God. And Elihu answered and said, chapter 35, and Elihu answered and said, Do you think this to be just? Do you say it is right as one's right before God, that you ask what advantage one has? How is one better off than one had sinned? One answers you and your friends with you. Look at the heavens and see, and behold the clouds which are higher than you. If you have sinned, what do you accomplish against him? And if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do to him? If you are righteous, what do you give to him, or what does he receive from your hand? Your wickedness concerns a man like yourself, and your righteousness a son of man. Because of the multitude of oppressions, people cry out. They call for help because of the arm of the Almighty. And none says, Where is God, one's maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches one's being more than the beasts of the earth, and makes one's being wiser than the birds of the heavens? There they cry out, and he does not answer, because of the pride of evil men. Surely God does not hear an empty cry, nor does the Almighty regard it. How much less when you say that you do not see him, that the case is before him, and you are waiting for him. And now his anger does not punish, and he does not take much note of transgression. Job opens his mouth in empty talk. He multiplies words without knowledge. Chapter 36. And Elihu continued and said, Bear with one's being a little, and one shows you, for one has yet something to say on God's behalf. One gets one's knowledge from afar, and ascribes righteousness to one's Maker. For truly one's words are not false. One who is perfect in knowledge is with you. Behold, God is mighty, and does not despise any. He is mighty in strength of understanding. He does not keep the wicked alive, and gives the afflicted their right. He does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous, and with kings on the throne, he sets them forever, and they are exalted. If they are bound in chains, and caught in the cords of affliction, then he declares to them their work and their transgressions, that they are behaving arrogantly. He opens their ears to instruction, and commands that they return from iniquity. They listen and serve him. They complete their days in prosperity, and their years in pleasantness. And if they do not listen, they perish by the sword, and die without knowledge. The godless in heart cherish anger. They do not cry for help when he binds them. They die in youth, and their life ends among the cult prostitutes. He delivers the afflicted by their affliction, and opens their ear by adversity. He also allured you out of distress into a broad place where there was no cramping, and what was set on your table was full of fatness. But you are full of judgment, and you are full of judgment on the wicked. Judgment and justice seize you. Beware lest wrath entice you into scoffing, and let not the greatness of the ransom turn you aside. Will your cry for help avail to keep you from distress, or all the force of your strength? Do not long for the night, when people vanish in their place. Take care, do not turn to iniquity, for this you have chosen rather than affliction. Behold, God is exalted in his power. Who is a teacher like him? Who has prescribed for him his way, or who can say, you have done wrong? Remember to extol his work, of which men have sung. All mankind has looked on it. Man beholds it from afar. Behold, God is great, and we know him not. The number of his years is unsearchable. For he draws up the drops of water, they distill his mists in rain, which the skies pour down and drop on mankind abundantly. Can anyone understand the spreading of the clouds, the thunderings of his pavilion? Behold, he scatters his lightning about him and covers the roots of the sea. For by these he judges peoples, he gives food in abundance. He covers his hands with the lightning and commands it to strike the mark. Its crashing declares his presence. The cattle also declare that he rises. Chapter 37. At this also one's heart trembles and leaps out of its place. Keep listening to the thunder of his voice and the rumbling that arrives from his mouth. Under the whole heaven he lets it go, and his lightning to the corners of the earth after his voice roars. He thunders with his majestic voice, and he does not restrain the lightnings when his voice is heard. God thunders wondrously with his voice. He does great things that one cannot comprehend. For to the snow he says, fall on the earth, likewise to the downpour, his mighty downpour. He seals up the hand. Likewise to the downpour, his mighty downpour. He seals up the hand of every man, that all men whom he made know it. Then the beasts go into their lairs and remain in their dens. From its chamber arrives the whirlwind, and cold from the scattering winds. By the breath of God ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen fast. He loads the thick cloud with moisture. The clouds scatter with his lightning. They turn around and around by his guidance, to accomplish all that he commands them. On the face of the habitable world, whether for correction or for his land or for love, he causes it to happen. Hear this, O Job, stop and consider the wondrous works of God. Do you know how God lays his command upon them, and causes the lightning of his cloud to shine? Do you know the balancings of his clouds, the wondrous works of him who is perfect in knowledge? You whose garments are hot, when the earth is still because of the south wind? Can you, like him, spread out the skies hard as a cast metal mirror? Teach one's being what one says to him. One cannot draw up one's case because of darkness. Is it told to him that one would speak? Is it told him that one would speak? Did a man ever wish that he would be swallowed up? And now no one looks on the light when it is bright in the skies, when the wind has passed and cleared them. Out of the north arrives golden splendor. God is clothed with awesome majesty. The Almighty, one cannot find him. He is great in power, justice, and abundant righteousness. He does not violate. Therefore, men reverentially fear him. He does not regard any who are wise in their own conceit. Chapter 38. Then Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dressed for action like a man, one questions you. You make it known to one's being. You make it known to me. I question you, and you make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Or who shut in the sea with doors, when it burst out from the womb? When I made clouds in its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus do you arrive, and no farther, and here your proud waves are stayed. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the skirts of the earth, and the wicked are shaken out of it? It is changed like clay under the seal, and its features stand out like a garment. From the wicked their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all this. Where is the way to the dwelling of light? And where is the place of darkness, that you may take it to its territory, and that you may discern the paths to its home? You know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? What is the way to the place where the light is distributed, or where the east wind is scattered upon the earth? Who has cleft a channel for the torrents of rain, and a way for the thunderbolt, to bring rain on a land where no man is, on the desert in which there is no man, to satisfy the waste and desolate land, and to make the ground sprout with grass? Has the rain a father, or who has begotten the drops of dew? From whose womb did the ice arrive forth? And who has given birth to the frost of heaven? The waters are hard like stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season, or can you guide the bear with its children? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, that a flood of waters covers you? Can you send forth lightnings, that they go and say to you, here we are? Who has put wisdom in the inward parts, or given understanding to the mind? Who can number the clouds by wisdom, or who can tilt the waterskins of the heavens? When the dust runs into a mass, and the clods stick fast together, can you hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens, or lie in wait in their thicket? Who provides for the raven its prey? Who provides for the raven its prey, when its young ones cry to God for help, and wander about for lack of food? Chapter 39. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the does? Can you number the months that they fulfill? And do you know the time when they give birth, when they crouch, bring forth their offspring, and are delivered of their young? Their young ones are strong, they grow up in the open, they go out, and they do not return to them. And do not return to them. Who has let the wild donkey go free? Who has loosed the bonds of the swift donkey, to whom I have given the arid plain for his home, and the salt land for his dwelling place? He scorns the tumult of the city. He hears not the shouts of the driver. He ranges the mountains as his pasture, and he searches after every green thing. Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Does he spend the night at your manger? Can you bind him in the furrow with ropes, or does he harrow the valleys after you? Do you depend on him because his strength is great, and you leave him and leave and you leave to him your labor? Do you have faith in him that he returns your grain and gather it to your threshing floor? The wings of the ostrich wave proudly, and are they the pinions and plumage of love? For she leaves her eggs to the earth, and lets them be warmed on the ground, forgetting that a foot may crush them, and that the wild beasts may trample them. She deals cruelly with her young, as if they are not hers, Though her labor be in vain, yet she has no fear, because God has made her forget wisdom and given her no share in understanding. When she rouses herself to flee, she laughs at the horse and his rider. Do you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with a mane? Do you make him leap like the locust? His majestic snorting is terrifying. He paws in the valley and exults in his strength. He goes out to meet the weapons. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. He does not turn back from the sword. Upon him rattle the quiver, the flashing spear, and the javelin. With fierceness and rage he swallows the ground and cannot stand still at the sound of the trumpet. When the trumpet sounds, he says, "Aha!" He smells the battle from afar, the thunder of the captains, and the shouting. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars and spreads his wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the rock he dwells and makes his home, on the rocky crag and stronghold. From there he spies out the prey. His eyes behold it from far away. His young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there he is. And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, said to Job, does a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. Then Job answered Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, and said, Behold, one is of small account. What does one answer you? One lays one's hands on one's mouth. One has spoken once and does not answer twice, and one does not proceed further. And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Dress for action like a man. One questions you, and you make it known to me. I question you, and you make it known to me. Do you even put me in the wrong? Do you condemn me that you are in the right? Do you have an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? Adorn yourself with majesty and dignity. Clothe yourself with glory and splendor. Pour out the overflowings of your anger, and look on everyone who is proud and abase him. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low, and tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them all in the dust together. Bind their faces in the world below. Then I also acknowledge to you that your right hand can save you. Behold, behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron. He is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword. For the mountains yield food for him, where all the wild beasts play. Under the lotus plants he lies, and the shelter of the reeds, and in the marsh. For his shade the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him by his eyes, or pierce his nose with a snare? Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook, with a fish hook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Does he make many pleas to you? Does he speak to you soft words? Does he make a covenant with you? This is chapter 41. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Does he make many pleas to you? Does he speak to you soft words? Does he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Do you play with him as with a bird, or you put him on a leash for your girls? Do traders bargain over him? Do they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You do not do it again. Behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? Who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. I do not keep silence concerning his limbs, or his mighty strength, or his godly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who could arrive near him with a bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that no air can arrive between them. They are joined one to another, they clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils arrives forth smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame arrives forth from his mouth. In his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. The folds of his flesh stick together, firmly cast on him, and immovable. His heart is hard as stone, hard as the lower millstone. When he raises himself up, the Almighty are afraid. At the crashing they are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts the iron as straw. He counts the iron as straw, and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him, sling stones are turned to stubble. Clubs are counted as stubble. He laughs at the rattle of javelins. His underparts are like sharp potsherds. He spreads himself like a threshing sledge on the mire. He makes the deep boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Behind him leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be white-haired. On earth there is not his like, the creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. Then Job answered, chapter 42. Then Job answered Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, and said, I know that you can do all things, and that one knows that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, one has uttered what one does not understand, or what one did not understand, things too wonderful for one's being, which one did not know. Hear, and one speaks. One questions you, and you make it known to one's being. One has heard of you by the hearing of the ear, and now one's eyes see you. Therefore one despises oneself, and repents in dust and ashes. After Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, had spoken these words to Job, Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, said to Eliphaz the Temanite, My anger burns against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Now therefore take the 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves, and my servant Job prays for you. For I accept this prayer, not to deal with you according to your folly, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite went and did what Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, had told them. And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, accepted Job's prayer. And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, gave Job twice as much as he had before. Then arrived to him all his brothers and sisters, and all who had known him before, and ate bread with him in his house. And they showed him sympathy, and comforted him for all the evil that Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, had brought upon him. And each of them gave him a piece of money and a ring of gold. And Yahweh the Lord Yahweh, blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. And he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He had also 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he called the name of the first daughter Jemimah, and the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Kirin Hapuk. And in all the land there were no women so beautiful as Job's daughters. And their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. And after this Job lived 140 years, and saw his sons and his sons' sons 4 generations. And Job died an old man and full of days.